felt it would give us the best access to the strongest possible group of senior insurance decision makers.
InsurTech Insights is a must-do conference, I think, for the network that is built here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bobby Srivastav. I'm co-founder, CEO of Solvrays, and I'm so excited to be participating and moderating this panel with this amazing panelists that you see here. But before we get to doing intros, I just want to set the stage up for the conversation that we're going to have, for the next 40 minutes. When we think about underwriting, we're going to be talking about this in our panel. I feel like we've entered the pressure cooker era. I was at the CPCU a few weeks back, and when I talked to a lot of the underwriters, think about the massive changes that they're facing right now. They're being asked to do something that I feel like sometimes you have to take a step back and have a lot of empathy for them, because they, it's like, hey, move faster, but be more precise. Grow aggressively, but we've got to protect that judgment. Adopt AI, but we've got, how do we make sure it's accurate as well? And and we're making these types of decisions in an environment that, we are also learning the risks. So, we're going to be jumping into a lot of the conversation that we're going to have. So I'm going to turn it over to Nandita first to do a quick intro, and then Scott, and then we'll get started.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, speak louder.
This work now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Bobby. Hi, I'm Nandita Nandi. I'm the head of AI for underwriting for the global specialty business at The Hartford. And we are leading a multi-year transformation journey of underwriting itself, and how can that be reimagined using AI. And I think we can get to the three pressures, Bobby, because that's on top of mind every day. As I'm on the business side and we are leading the transformation through with all the new emerging tech, though there are pressures surrounding the key initiatives for sure.
Scott?
Hi, Scott Hamm, CEO of Pinpoint Predictive. We help P&C carriers select risk more precisely. We provide a real unique read on the individual, and then the carrier develops the business rules on how to, whether it's business they want to write, whether they don't want to write, and in the underwriting context, is it somebody on the line that, frankly, we need the judgment of the experts, and those are the underwriters. We'll talk about it more today, but that's one area that will, in my mind, always be there, regardless of how powerful AI gets. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, so jumping right in, so what would you say is like the, Nandita, like what's the biggest force that's putting organizations under this pressure right now?
So we are in a soft market. The number one thing is growth targets. There are growth targets with each line of business. And in global specialty, we have around 10 lines of business. And we also have ambitions to grow on more complex as such. There's a specialty business, and can we get into the more complex, the ones that we've been avoiding, the ones that our underwriting are not comfortable with? Can we try to tap into those kind of accounts is what number one is. And number two is the stress on workforce. There's a lot of experienced underwriters that's going to retire. And with all these transformation efforts, there's a stress on testing these AI outputs and building, being part of that build and transformation. So as we are not hiring and training new talent into underwriting the way we used to do, not with the same volume, how do we sustain and grow at the same time? And then the third biggest stress is all the change and the buzz around AI, and are we fast enough? We don't want to be left behind, but at the same time, how can we trust it? And how much of a human due diligence is still needed? And then the underwriters are constantly asking the question, if I still need to validate it, what benefit does it bring? So how do you still paint that long-term picture for them while they have to pick up and do the initial testing and training for us? Are the three big things on top of mind.
And Scott, when you talk to clients, what are some things that what's on top of their mind?
Yeah, and actually something that probably isn't spoken about a lot, which is the cost of indecision. And what I mean by the cost of indecision is, underwriting and underwriters are being deluged with new data, better models, dashboards everywhere. And I think the industry itself has focused on that, rightly so, and perhaps has been a little lighter on the decisioning. And with the way things are dynamic now, and you can't wait annually to change things, the market will penalize you quickly if you're mispricing. The cost of capital will penalize you greatly if you don't move quickly. And I think the challenge and the pressures on underwriters is we're getting all of this information, but I'm not clear yet on decisioning. What is the risk we want to write? What is the risk we don't want to write? What do we want our portfolio to look like? And without that kind of guidance yet, present company excluded, I'm sure that guidance is there, but without that guidance, it's putting added stress on them because I mentioned judgment. We're asking these folks that truly do an art to trust AI to help them, to trust new data to help them. But if you ask them if they had conviction over what is impacting her or his decision more, I think they would struggle. And I think they want to know what is our North Star in terms of underwriting and what we want. So I really do think it's something not talked about, but the pressure they're feeling by not having that kind of guidance.
And Scott, you're bringing up such a great point around trust. And I heard one of my mentors a long time ago, because I've been building in this insurtech space for the last 11 years, it's trust but verify. And I feel like when I look at this, look at what's happening at our expo floor here, I love it because as a builder, it's great to see the enthusiasm that a lot of builders are coming in. But at what point are we going to take the speed versus the precision aspect that underwriters are needing? And then Nandita, I think about this topic of talent every single day. Every single day. It's we are losing so much talent in the industry. There was a statistic that 400,000 people are leaving this year. That's crazy. We're halfway through this year. And then, how are we, really looking at that? And I know that's one of the topics that we're going to be seeing. But, from your lens, we talked a little bit about the precision, the trust piece, but where do you see carriers struggle the most?
Sure, I can take it. Again, I guess I'm going to give answers that aren't one carrier related. It's across the board.
Which is that's the beautiful part from your perspective, right? You get to see from multiple perspectives.
Right. And always saying that present company is excluded in any of my comments, unless it's a good comment. In terms of quote struggle, I would say if I take it to the executive level, where I deal mainly, it's understanding the importance of certain elements. And Bobby, you were referencing this, and I hate to beat trust, but explainability is part of that. And if I could say there's a bit of a struggle because explainability has gone from having it in the NAIC proposed model and everyone looking at it as a regulator type thing to now I actually think it's part of commercial implementation, commercial execution. And I'm not sure, and maybe there are executives here that will tell me, I'm not sure if they've made the progress across that line to really understand that it may not be, this is going to sound controversial, it may not be how accurate, but how well can we explain our decision? And is it a well-founded decision that we've made? And I think we're just not there yet, and it's a struggle to get there.
I agree, Scott. It's a very human-centric business, ours. So the aspect that brings stickiness and trust is explainability. So that's there. But from our point of view, I think the next level of where we struggle with could be, how do you justify or how do you show ROI when the transformation process is not just one stage or two stage. It's a multi-stage, and multiple things, multiple part of the puzzles need to come together for it to be impactful. So how do you still justify constant investment? And then there's a lot of diversions, there's a lot of noise, there's all parts of org now getting excited about all the new AI tools that they can also find. So the boundaries between what's a tech decisions and where do you trust tech and how long do you keep that trust is constantly being challenged, because the tech side of the world, we still trust them and we give them that runway. But then do we say, in the old traditional way, we wouldn't evaluate something in 3-year time period, but do we evaluate something in 6 month or an year time period to revisit and say, is this still the right path? Is this tech still the up-to-date tech that we are relying on? So while we say there's insurance value chain transformation or underwriting, I see it also as more the technology and the way we are doing business is going through a transformation. And that's where like it's more tangible versus trying to show direct business impact or direct value year over year for this.
If I could add on, I think it's a similar vein. Not only continuing to look at the tech, but with the onslaught, if you look out here, there's just so much new data that people want to feed in, and I think carriers, the industry has done a good job of bringing that data in. What I think has to be looked at on a regular basis, and I'm not sure it is how do you retire data that's already been taken in that isn't carrying its weight anymore. Otherwise, you've got, if we look at underwriters, which is underwriting track, you've got underwriters just being deluged with just tons of data with no real discipline on retiring data and analyzing, okay, I'm bringing in this, it's very strong. Are there things we should be taking out? And constant validation of the lift and the regulatory acceptance of the data you're bringing in is necessary.
But Scott, that's the nature of underwriters, it's just not enough. We want to keep asking more. So how do you get them comfortable with it's less more, it's less enough? Who's the guideline going to have your back? Like, how do they feel comfortable and they're not going to be dinged in on it? Like, the whole process needs to be comfortable as well, and that's taking time. And doing so many things at once, it's not going to help that.
I love the concept of retiring old models, retiring data, because to your point, now more than ever, data is becoming so much easier to access and also like integrate. And some of the stuff that even we from our company perspective, like we're tackling at it from an orchestration layer to say, how do we help unify data, documents, and systems to make it easier? But that's such a great point, because now, if you're, do you really need to go to 5 different data sources? Or can you get one? And we're seeing a lot of that, even aggregation. Like there's a company that that we're talking to. They have great climate data, but they've integrated other data points. So from a consumer, like for somebody like as a system person that's wanting to get better renewal data to underwriters, it becomes so much more easier because I could just look at one source versus having to navigate, what traditionally has been, I've got to go to 5 different user interfaces, get that data. I mean, that whole process is, can be, or things that are now possible more than ever. But, going back to some of the pieces, Nandita, that you were talking about from a transformation perspective, where do you see transformations typically stall? because we like to start things. We love starting our 5-year projects, 3-year projects. Hopefully they're a lot shorter nowadays, but I'm an
No.
optimist. I'm an optimist at the core. But what are you seeing where carriers stall?
So it may seem like the transformation is stalling, but where I see that perception can come across is when there are multiple work streams that's being started, but nothing has reached 90% completion or adoption or rollout, and there's just mini pilots and mini phases of rollouts happening or build happening at the same time, which may feel like, is this working? Is this going to work? It's putting a strain on the system for sure. So in our teams, in our transformation teams, we focus on 3 things as we build and roll things out: people, process, and product. So what is it that's being built, and then who is it impacting, and what's the change management communication plan? Who needs to do what, and what are the parties that needs to be governing it, testing it, getting it to the next stage? Are they all ready? So when we lay all these out and then we roll things, we see it go well versus where we see from the tech side things rolled out and we haven't done the full communication plan and everybody is not being informed, then we see a little bit of chaos and the perception that it's being stalled. There's also the big dollars of investment that go into an AI transformation project and not seeing the value or realization or feeling it. If every seat is not feeling it, then that may also build the perception that the transformation is getting stalled. So it's a chicken and egg kind of a thing, Bobby, because if everybody wants to feel it, then the one side of the debate says roll something out small to everyone. And that's not complete, that's not fully baked. So if you only do phases-wise or work stream-wise, then you feel like it's very slow. So how do you really tackle? We feel like we do both and still hear a bit of, oh, it's slow, it's not fast enough.
Bobby, you and I live this. So, transformation and why it's not going as quickly or at all. So, I think pilots and proof of concepts and proof of values are failing when there's no idea of what the business is going to change as a result of success. Who's going to own the change? How are you going to incent the change? It can't just be a technology exercise to look at it and go, hey, it works. Because if there's no other work stream or no business person behind it that's been determined before it starts, that what are we going to change and who's going to own it outside of the technology. Without that, you're really just looking at what I would call a science fair, where folks are just looking at things, and I'm not being negative, I'm just saying they're looking at the next shiny object, which could in fact help them, but there hasn't been any determination yet of a problem that's being solved and who's going to own that problem, rather than just going to the science fair and seeing that. So if I could ask every carrier here, just, when you're doing these, if you still do proof of values, I don't know how many do.
They still do.
They still, or pilots. It's so important. You have to have the technology, you have to have the validators, but before engaging with somebody, really understand, how is this going to change X? What is the problem we're solving, and who will own it outside of technology, so that when they get done in the sandbox saying, yes, it works, it keeps moving and there's a plan to do it. And I'll say, I think we're getting better, but we still run into problems like that out there, where we have a successful, whatever you want to call it, and then we have to find a home for it. And there was no home before.
And I think sometimes when we see carriers undergo some of these start small phase rollouts, I think when we this is my point of view, because coming from corporate before I went into startup world, we used to do these types of initiatives, like these. Transformation is not a new word, right? Like we've always done transformation projects, like modernization of the core. But the one thing I would say is, how do we do it in the most nimble way possible that has the best outcomes and stick through it, right? And sometimes I feel like, are we overcomplicating that transformation project? And I oftentimes think about that question. Are we, and from an underwriting lens, Nandita, maybe you can talk about at what point, have you seen things that, at what point do we say, hey, this is great? It may not be like all of the 100 edge cases, like maybe we get it down to a handful, but at what point do you say, I'm happy with this, but these are how I'm going to navigate, but it doesn't like slow down the transformation? Because how many times have we been in projects where it never gets done, it doesn't get rolled out because of all these edge cases that we want to figure it out, and would love your take on that.
So that's a very good point, right? And it touches what, Scott, you just said, because the line of business, their priorities are clear. Their goals are to get more targets done, more sales done, more accounts closed. They cannot be in a situation of owning these features that we are building or pieces that we are building as part of transformation. That's where the transformation office comes. And that's been working well, because in the lack of it, and when we did not have it, the business were saying tech is building things and throwing it over the wall, and there's no one to catch it and say this is good enough. And Bobby, to your point, that's also where most of there's so much brilliant tech out on the floor there, but it doesn't see the day of the light, even if you go and do pilots in companies, is because there's no one maintaining and saying this is good enough to the business. When you work on the line of business underwriting side, they would always look for 100%. I wanted to say 99.9, but every version of the output that comes, they would go like, well, it didn't say this, but you never described this in requirements, so it's not going to read mind, right? But that's always what we would hear. So that's why I think what we do in my team is there's an underwriting layer who checks things and says 90% is good enough. And we would be responsible to take it and maintain that 90%, or take it to the next level of few more percent and improve it, and take it even to the next stage, because there's an output evolution of where the end goal is, and we may not see it in this MVP stages 1, 2, 3, right? So that should give comfort, and that is giving comfort to both sides, the tech side and the business line side, that there's a party that's going to own this, and that's going to be their targets and day jobs, and not up to just tech, or not up to just the line of business.
And so much of some of the work that you're just talking about, it is not tech. It's change management at its core, right? Like we sometimes forget that it's, tech is tech. And now more than ever, tech is very easy to get it could be very accessible. But the key is, it's not about accessibility, it's about having the expertise and the experience to navigate, like some of the battle scars that Scott and I've had in the past. But it's also working with people and bringing them along in that journey. And I think that's for the carriers, but also for the partners to go hand in hand in that journey. Because ultimately, we're not just selling widgets, right? We're wanting to transform and create impact.
Yeah, I do think the tech area is much easier to work with now than in the past, definitely. And I think they would probably prefer that there was something they were working to solve as well, because otherwise, just think of the time they spend on things that don't go anywhere. I'm sure they have better things they would like to focus on. So I think it does, the technical side has been easier to work with. They do get excited, but it just falls flat in a vacuum if there's nothing to go to after that on the business side.
So we've been talking about precision, but also consistent is key in this world. But the world of underwriting is changing. It's super dynamic. So how do you create that consistency in your organization?
It's very hard, especially on my side of the business. Most of the underwriting knowledge is in the gut, or how were they trained was word of mouth, and that doesn't exist in a paper or digital format anywhere. So how do you capture this 20, 30 years of experience in a sustainable model, excuse me, which could be an AI agent, but could be multiple AI agents holding that experience? I think this is where the new tech can help in surfacing or bringing that experience to that summary and insights level. But then where I also see, Bobby, is that the risks evolve. So it's still hard, while we are going to lose this institutional knowledge and brains, which has been because of all the retirements coming up, but the kind of risks that we are dealing with is also getting more dynamic and changing. That's also where I think crunching the data from claims and connecting it to what can we improve on the guidelines and what do we flag for underwriters to look for. It's a different way of underwriting versus what they would be doing now or what they're used to doing. So that kind of using that tech to bring everything in one spot is not just helping store that experience, but also bringing consistency for how it should be looked at, and then training the newer workforce that comes on board. Because if you actually sat next to every underwriter, they all underwrite differently, and there's no defined template of this is what you should be looking for, and this is where you should be looking for. So they may have their own flavors, but there's a place in the previous chat we were hearing about policy admin where they'll go put something down for notes, but even there's no consistency, right? So as we are building these things, we are also coming up with templates of what should it be, what's good enough, what should you look at, and where should you look at, and how should this be documented, so we get some kind of a structure to this.
Yeah, I was actually thinking down the line, you or Nandi, on that. The consistency, I think, has to be in the framework on this. And when I say the framework, you know, it's back to something I said before, is what are we going to write, what aren't we going to write, what do we want our portfolio to look like, and put that in concrete. You know, there's an old quote, I forget who said it, but you put your goals and your frameworks in concrete, and how you get theirs in sand. And I think as long as you're clear on what the ultimate goal is, the execution then feeds itself, but has guiding guide rails to go by. So if I'm an underwriter, I know what we want to write. I know what we don't. I know what everything needs to look at. Now, how I get there, I can look at data sources. I can look at old information. I can use my gut for art because I know what I'm shooting for. And that has to be consistent. If that's inconsistent, then we get back to the pressure on an underwriter to figure out, you know, is she making the right decision? Well, who knows, because she really doesn't know what she's shooting for. And that's why I think the consistency is so important.
I know this is like Nandita's favorite topic around data governance. So, you know, what do you think, you know, when we're looking at, you know, Scott, a little bit of what you've talked about, like it's a little bit of doing that dance between being flexible and being disciplined. But then what is, in your thought process, what's the role of AI and data governance?
I wouldn't say favorite, Bobby, but
just geek out with her. She'll no, just kidding.
No, but I feel like as we put a lens to underwriting experience thinning out, there's also very experienced data risk, security, governance lens, which is not getting importance, or that workforce and that experience is also almost diminishing, and they are under immense pressure to just approve all kinds of things, and people are coming at them at all angles. And there's also senior leadership pressure to do different things and to try different tech and to go fast, that they do not get all the time to consume and risk, think of risk and think of mitigation plans in a well thought out manner. So they are under pressure as well. And as we think of a successful rollout, which will be adopted, which will also be sticking to regulations in every state, and we have a global business, so also on the outside of US domicile, then I feel like this governance layer of the AI governance and the data governance, it becomes super important, as well as from the underwriting side, where we are having QM and product team also coming up with guidelines for how do you document these AI results on the underwriting side, and how do you test? Because we've had also people think that if AI says it, they don't need to test it and they don't need to validate it. So underlining that not so stressed message or not so popular message of test and verify before you trust needs to be give weight, because if we actually pay attention to all the NAIC regulations there, they put a big lens to predictive models. They don't just say AI. They say every predictive model has to go through a certain level of testing, a certain level of bias testing. I don't think companies even know how to do that yet. So while they are rolling out a lot of new change, so doing that and rolling out is going to take time, but I think that's the right structure to do it, and there are teams needed to kind of govern that for sure.
And this is where a vendor has to understand, if we're going to be in insurance and have carriers as our clients, they're under immense pressure and they're the regulated party. And so if we're not doing that, we should take every step, and this is we as vendors, take every step to be as secure as possible, whether that be SOC 2, Type 2, and put in privacy protections, AI procedures, enforce them, be in compliance, but then also work with the carrier on what they need. There's a lot of areas we can push back on. This is not one we can really push back on if we want to be a true partner. And that's how I look at it, is we're arm in arm in this. And the regulators, those that have adopted things and those that are considering it, allow you to use a third party, but it doesn't take away the responsibility that you have. And so we have to take it as seriously or more, because something happens with the carrier, their publicity is bad, they get a ding. Something bad happens to us, we're out of business. And we've got to take it that seriously. And it's probably against the way of thinking, but start with compliance thinking and legal thinking, and then move on to problem solving.
Yeah, it's all foundational level pieces that it's, if you, to your point, if you don't come up with the security compliance first mindset, it's going to be very tough for folks to serve this market. And then, the point that, on the data piece, data is the fundamental layer, right? It's the last thing we need is garbage in, garbage out, and training some of the things that we want to do as fast as we want to do it. But if we don't take a step back, we talk about it, from a mindset perspective, take a step back and breathe. Got to do that with data, and we've got to make sure data is good and find good partners that could help with data too. So, as we come to, I do want to leave like a couple of minutes for Q&A, but we've, we're in 2026 I think in the last 3 years, my goodness, the innovation that's come in. What are your thoughts around high-performing underwriting organizations? What does that look like now?
Now it's not super high-performing, but maybe in 4 or 5 years' time, Bobby, I'm very hopeful, and hopefully it's not 4 or 5, and I'm targeting 3. Is where like we have this swivel chair. Where underwriters have to go from different systems and different applications for information. We want to reimagine how that can take place, and can it be an easy experience? Can it be modernized? Can it attract new workforce that you want to actually go and become underwriters because you like it? You like the experience so much. We focus a lot on customer user experience, but I think also investing in our own internal underwriting experience is going to go a long way. So we want to target completely transformation and modernizing that, as well as claims. Claims get left behind, Bobby. That's your favorite topic, but that's also a team where we see a lot of learnings can come from there, and they need a lot of support as well. And we need to modernize how we adjudicate and take care of data and their experience. And can we bring that end-to-end process together a bit, like more like a feedback loop and not 2 silos?
And then, this is like a rapid fire. and this will be a fun one. What part of the underwriting should be absolutely be automated, and what shouldn't be?
Okay, I can go first. We spend a long time validating data and doing data entry. There is not a blockbuster underwriting workbench that most companies have, and this is usually a combination of policy admin system, which we pretend like it's a very good platform for also underwriting. So there's a lot of manual data entry and checking. I don't want to see underwriters trying to do that. There's a lot of support that we can give them for risk assessment and risk analysis. Like, can we do that? And I feel underwriting role itself is evolving as well, not just, trust AI adopted, but be part of that change, be part of the people who are building that new AI. So when this rolls out, you know what to do. And when you are engaging with brokers, you build that trust naturally and not like a forced top-down way.
Yeah, I won't repeat what Andy said. I would say we could also automate with the information we have. You can automate some clear yeses or nos in business so that the customer experience is better, and underwriters are spending time, like we said before, on those fringe cases that really do take the expertise of an underwriter. And I think removing those menial tasks, removing clear yeses and nos so they don't spend time on that, and freeing them up to work on stuff that's why they're underwriters. I couldn't believe the figure you said about how many people are leaving the industry, but to me, that allows them or enables them to practice the art they want to practice without spending ungodly amounts of time on menial tasks that really should have been gone a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think about, I think about that a lot, especially with the statistic that I shared, and then another statistic, I think it was, I can't remember what analyst firm, 50% of the insurance industry is going to start to retire by 2028. And I'm like, holy crap, this is half of 2026. And, we talked a lot about the talent piece. But, when I think about what carriers should do, capability that they must do now, build now to remain competitive, what would you say quickly that one capability that they should do right now?
I would say make risk selection a discipline, not a byproduct of pricing, because I think many of us now are quoting and letting the market determine what we take. And I think we could do a much better job of the discipline of risk selection, and then let that be the lever and let pricing handle it from there.
I would want to see clearance be completely automated, and triaging be automated. So underwriters spend time in accounts that's going to go somewhere. And how can we do proper change management and mindset shift towards not shying away from complex risk? As such, it's specialty, it's complex, but like shying away from accounts having losses, or can we understand risk better? Can we learn from the most recent claims more, and leverage that historic data and forget all the other pieces? And can we do some kind of a close quote with less broker back and forth with what we receive in the first or second go, and not having to wait to 8th, 9th, 10th, 20th communication, and which will take 2 months of time. So if we shorten that, I think we are good.
Yeah, it's all about speed, flexibility, and one of the use cases I'm very, very bullish on is renewals. Like I've heard, I don't come from P&C, but I saw some of that, and I saw that in personal scenarios where I made some home improvements, and I was like, ooh, I come from insurance and I know what's happening here. And, now data is available, but how do we integrate that? How do we flow that? So underwriters are paying attention to that versus the normal pieces. So I know there's one question from our audience around the main challenge in explainability. I know we touched on that. Maybe like a few more comments around what's the main challenge of AI or when we think about AI models and the explainability piece.
I think it's the how long do you have to check? How long do you have to look at the sources? Because when we build and roll this out, of course, we say put citations under everything, but the questions we get asked is, well, when do you remove this? When do we start trusting it? And we are not quite sure we have the answer to that one yet.
Yeah, I guess my short answer would be, you can have the most sophisticated model there is, but if you can't explain the basis of the decision it's making, then you're in a bad place for your board, the regulators, a customer. So that's how I look at it, as the models are just getting better and better and better. But if you make a decision and can't explain it without spending months back engineering what happened, then you've put yourself behind. So I think those that can do that will be ahead of the curve.
I think if I may add one more point to that, Bobby, will be we are trying to automate a manual data review task. So you make one mistake and you lose that trust in the machine. And it's very hard to gain that trust back. And we know nothing is going to be 99.99 or 100%. So they're always going to go back to that. That's still an open challenge of when does this stop? When do we get to comfort level, or how do you even make everyone comfortable with enough? And there will be this 2% of gap, but let's get comfortable with that, I think.
Yeah, I think it's, as we head to this era that we're in, some of these same similar topics we were also talking, it's just now a totally different landscape. But I'll end with, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. But if we were to leave off stage with one word of what does it look like in 2030, what would you say in one word? What would that look like for underwriting?
One word.
I know, I like my tricky questions.
Conviction.
AI assisted at every stage. It's not one word, but.
Oh, perfect. And I would say, conviction, which means trust, So thank you so much. And if you guys want to talk to us afterwards, we'll be here for a little bit, but thank you.